Hi, everybody. David Nour back with you for another Sales Community Tech Sales Insights Live with my co-host, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks. Good to see you. And we have a delightful guest in Beth Vassallo, VP of North America and GM for Nexthink. Hello, Beth.
Hi, David. Hi, Randy.
Hey.
It's great to see you, and thank you for our podcast conversation this morning. I love this idea of evangelizing, kind of a new category, a new approach, new to market. But before we start, would you kindly start with a little bit of your background, kind of where you've been professionally, what you've done, and how you've arrived here?
Absolutely. Would love to share that with you. Hopefully I don't make too many people chuckle. So let me kind of start off with, I actually started my career in IT, and I started as a software developer. And after a year, I found out I wasn't very good at it. And luckily, I was able to kind of retain my job, and they moved me into IT operations, and I became responsible for the end users. And looking back on it now, I think all I needed was a customer. I think that's really what impacted the performance of my job, and probably why it landed me in sales and sales leadership. So that's where I started, and I've kind of said before, my career's been much like a jungle gym instead of climbing a ladder. I've done a lot of different things for a lot of different companies. I was a solution consultant and moved into sales really by luck. My sales rep went out on maternity leave and didn't come back. And so they kind of looked around, they're like, "You're it." And that's how I got into sales. And I was an individual contributor, and I did a lot of different kind of work there, selling different solutions. And then I moved to go and build out a channel at Silicon Graphics. And so it gave me kind of my first entry into what's it like to manage, because I wasn't directly responsible, right, or in control of all of the business. So that was a real learning process. So I did that for a few years. And then, I flipped again. I went and joined EMC actually, and I started out as a regional manager in an overlay organization. I only did it for about a year, and then I moved to Brocade, where I built not only the team, but the business, the OEM business, focusing on EMC as the worldwide client. And over a 4-year period, really ramped that business from like 0 to 400 million. It was incredible. It was quite a wild ride. So, was in the storage industry, storage area networking industry. And then I went to a startup and was in the high performance computing space, completely different. That company was bought and then merged into what's NVIDIA now. So completely different market. And from there, I went into the security space at Blue Coat Systems, which is now Symantec. And I led a worldwide team there. And then that's when I went to HPE, and that's where I met Randy. And I was in the networking organization, first in the field, working for Kevin Purcell. I'm not sure if he's joined us today.
Talking about Kevin, yeah.
Oh, wow, drop. There you go.
Great timing.
So then I moved into the business unit, and I was leading global accounts and enterprise services, and I had a big global, worldwide team. It was a whole lot of fun. It was a lot of challenge. And then the pivotal turning point in how I kind of got at Nexthink is I moved into the software business at HP, and I was running application delivery management. And, and then it was the acquisition with Micro Focus, and kind of went split ways. And I said, this is something that I want to stay doing. And Nexthink then found me, and I was looking for the right solution with an opportunity to build something again, and, in the right culture. So I found the perfect blend at Nexthink. And now after 4 years, vice president and general manager, started with 14 people. We're over 100 now in our go-to-market, and, went from about 4 million to 40 million. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So my question,
that's ARR too, right? So it's not necessarily on-prem. So to do that, and now unicorn status based on your last round. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I want to encourage our audience. Obviously, Mary Beth has got great experience and background, and we want you to jump in with your questions, comments, as you hear kind of her story and what her passion is. So Mary Beth, obviously the title of this session on evangelizing a new category, it seems to be that's a big part of your DNA. You like being that kind of the wild, wild west. Let me go and really build. Let me go convince people that this is a thing and it's got real enterprise value. Talk a little about where that came from and what drives you to go do that.
Yeah, I'll tell you some characteristics that go along with it and how we kind of approach it and why it's so important. So being an evangelist, I mean, specifically at Nexthink, you have to have like an entrepreneurial spirit first and foremost, because the conversations that we're having with our prospects, it's about actually changing the way that they do things. And change is hard, right? So in IT, traditionally they've always kind of bought and done the right things around management systems, monitoring systems, keeping the lights on, everything's green, and how to provision IT. But they haven't really taken the same approach when it comes to the end user. They're still sort of in this reactive mode. And so in order for us to kind of drive them to look at things, to become proactive, we like to tell stories. And so if you don't mind, I'll tell you a quick one. And it's about one of our customers before they were a customer, and they were one of our first. And, the CEO of this company, which is a pretty big insurance company in North America, went out and did a tour. He went and visited all of the offices of this company. And when he got back, he went to IT and he said, hey, there's a lot of problems. Our employees are not as productive as they should be. They don't have the device that they need. They're having performance problems. I talked to some employees that have to come in 30 minutes early just to boot their laptop. It's costing us overtime. He's like, I don't understand what's going on. And so IT looked back at him and said, well, how are we supposed to know if they don't call and tell us? And he said, what? We don't know if there's problems going on with our employees in their ability to get their job done unless they call and tell us. Well, we got to change that.
Yeah.
Enter Nexthink.
So Randy, and that's a great story. Love that. So talk about evangelizing. So Randy, a lot of sales professionals, great ones like, and sales leaders like Mary Beth that's worked at the EMC and HPE days. It seems to take a different DNA to want to go out there and just kind of pound and you got to be, you got to be resilient and you got to carry that flag to say this space, this sector matters.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I think back to, early days of EMC, we were, less than 50 employees, less than 100. And, that's evangelizing, which is far different than what they're doing now. And I think the hardest thing if you start with the hiring process is if somebody's only been a big company person, that kind of business card can kind of get them the meeting. But when you're at some company that nobody knows, then you really have to know your value prop. You really got to kind of fight hard. If you have great relationships, that helps. But if you don't have the relationships, then you really have to have your talk track and story and value prop down. And it's a hard grind, evangelizing. And typically it's, around being a startup.
So Mary Beth, I'm really curious, and I know Randy's got a great question on this. So if you have this DNA, if you have this passion, drive, grit, you've said in our conversation, it also has to translate into how you interview. So Randy, I think you have an interview question.
Yeah, on sales community, it's I forgot. I think it might be 49 slides. But for those that are interviewing, Mary Beth definitely has a whole best practice around that. And I will also refer people that are actually being interviewed to say, hey, if you want to do well interviewing, then you should go see what the interviewers are wanting to do. So that would be a whole show on itself. But Mary Beth, maybe you could share some snippets. And for those that don't know, you can go to salescommunity.com. We have a no-brainer 30-day free trial. If you just type in the search bar interviewing, then you'll see a whole bunch of things that come up, including Mary Beth's post. But anyway, Mary Beth, could you share some interviewing nuggets with us?
Absolutely. I think I want to start with the recruiting process first, because I think it actually is an important piece of the puzzle. So first and foremost, we have a great talent acquisition team here that we partner very closely with. So the first step in the process is actually defining the profile of the person that you want to actually be a candidate, right? So if we're not getting the right candidate from the right company, that it has the right kind of experience, right, that's going to fit here, then it makes the hiring, the interviewing all much harder. So it has to start with your talent acquisition team in defining the ideal profile of the salesperson. And then, what we did as an organization is we said, okay, we're going to set up an interview team. The interview team is going to have a specific role. Each person on the interview team has a specific role. One person will test for skill. The other person tests for knowledge. The other person will test for behavior. And then we have, instead of trying to do it all in one interview, we do the team, we kind of focus, and then we come together, we debrief, right? And then we kind of move forward, and then we go on to the next step. So that's the ultimate foundation of it. And what I said in the podcast earlier, what we did differently during the pandemic was we started to, because we couldn't be in person, we said, what can we do to really understand and see if this person has got that entrepreneurial spirit? Are they this curious learner? So we started interjecting a demo. And how do they actually view the technology? Can they actually link it to what the problem in IT is, and ultimately create a value statement around it? So we interjected that piece into the process that we already had established, and it's been a winner for us. It's really, really been able to hone in on if the candidate is going to be able to succeed here.
For our audience, when Randy Seidl mentioned this, I actually went into the sales community, and it is, you search by interviewing and you find Mary Beth's post. It is like 45 slides. And Mary Beth, I got to tell you, I love you also are asking business acumen, not just are they able to sell the technology solution, but can they articulate that to a business outcome? So I love that. And again, I want to echo Randy's comment, incredibly valuable for both sides. I'm looking for a BDR. I'm going to use some of these insights, and I think it's just as valuable for people that are interviewing. So,
by the way, Nour, you should post that in sales community.
I did earlier today. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. There you go. All right.
So we've got a question from Van Kim.
Van Kim, Mary Beth, how do you work with your marketing team today?
Well, I am very fortunate, to have an incredible marketing organization that's still growing, by the way. I mean, we just kind of completed field marketing in North America, but we work hand in hand. I mean, we actually have OKRs that are aligned around not only our pipeline, but our conversion rates and accelerating our opportunities that are in our pipeline. We came up with a very coordinated set of plays. We call them AAA, because the marketing organization is pivotal, right? And they're pivotal doing multiple things. And so we said, well, what do we have to do together? Well, we're creating a category and a brand, and we need to penetrate these target accounts. So the first A is the awareness play. So the marketing organization, the channel organization as well, and the sales organization is rallied around this set of awareness plays. Then we created, through account-based marketing, this activation, a set of activation plays. So we have a set of target accounts. We created an ABM, kind of set of plays where we're activating the set of target accounts. And then last but not least is we have a lot of pipeline, right? It's built over, 2020. How do we consistently keep our opportunities accelerating through the pipeline? Those are all very different things and different motions, and we are completely interlocked with the marketing organization around them. We built them together.
Love it. Love it. Love it. So the AAA, awareness, activation, accelerating, right? Love that. Yeah. Love that the way you're thinking about that. So talk about Nexthink. You and I in our podcast conversation talked about pre-pandemic, forget the lives and livelihoods that this pandemic has impacted aside, pre-pandemic, device health seemed to have been the red-headed stepchild, right? We'll just get around to it at some point. Suddenly overnight, we've got 100 million knowledge workers that are going to, work from anywhere, and that device health suddenly becomes really important. Talk about this COVID tailwind that you guys have benefited from, and how are CIOs thinking differently about the space that Nexthink plays in?
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting because we talked about being an evangelist, right? And it's exciting and great. It's also exhausting, right? So it's been 4 years of evangelizing, and look, COVID had incredible impacts, right, on a lot of things, a lot of businesses, and unfortunately, it's the intersection of completely what we do. So we have been evangelizing that the employee needs to be the center of IT for years. So our CEO, Pedro, had this vision of employee experience management 10 years ago, 14 years ago when he created this product. And, COVID has really driven all of the companies to start really thinking about, how do we put the employee at the center now? Like going from remote work to hybrid workplace, this trend is just continuing to accelerate a couple of things. It accelerates the digital transformation so companies can be, competitive. It's also accelerating and shifting the focus of CIOs, that I talk to when people in IT, from them focusing on those tangible assets to the intangible, and specifically human capital. And they're focused on this for a couple of different reasons. Yes, because COVID made them open their eyes to it. We kind of always saw it. Here's the thing, with employees, productivity is critical to any company, right? If employees aren't productive, they're not happy. And if they're in a customer-facing role, then your customer experience isn't so great either. So it's definitely made the shift. So they understand the ramifications and the connection between the employee and customer experience, but business growth, right? So if the company's priorities or key initiatives are to grow, whether it's through merger and acquisition, organic, through a partnership, whatever, making sure that employee productivity is aligned to one of those is now on the IT agenda. It wasn't before, and this is the tailwind that we're seeing.
So, Seidl, let me ask you, it seems like this device health, the sector that Nexthink plays in, was a latent pain, or it was a latent need that this pandemic brought front and center, right? So the dynamics have how we work changed, and suddenly that CIO has got to pay, their problem stack got reshuffled, right?
Right.
So the question of you is, how do I, if I'm evangelizing selling, if I'm trying to talk to people, something we believe is important, but it's not on their radar, what have you seen work really well in getting that nascent company on that CIO's radar? One. Two, how does an organization like Nexthink, and we know Mary Beth is a rock star, but how do they continue that momentum after the pandemic, when some people start to think about going back to the office and it may not be as big of a priority?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure it's probably been a harder sell evangelizing, but to me, the value prop is so compelling. I mean, for lack of better words, it's almost like a net promoter score for employees around their satisfaction with IT. So you would think it's a no-brainer. So I don't want to belittle so to me, it's evangelizing a little bit. Maybe it's a different space, but there's certainly, I think, other offerings that are a much harder lift. In Nour, as you've heard me say before, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of old school, but I think if you're in an elevator with the CFO and you have 30 seconds, what are you going to say? It's not 50 slides of all this techno mumbo jumbo. It's, in the case of what Mary Beth does, and I'm sure she could do better than me, but it's, employee satisfaction, it's productivity, which if I'm a CFO, I'm like, hey, okay, I hear that all the time. But if you can equate that to actual, revenue generation, saving money, getting a competitive advantage, getting more market share, kind of all things like that. So to me, anytime you're evangelizing anything, it's kind of, okay, if I'm with the CFO at 30 seconds, what can I say that's going to be really compelling for their radar. And then obviously you have to make sure that you've got the, solution and references and everything else behind it to stand behind it.
So build on that. I think you have a question around Mary Beth's sales process, because she also seems to be very methodical about how they do what they do.
Yeah. So, and I've got an upcoming book called Your Go-To Sales Advisor. So she and another 90 plus and yourself as well, Nour, were kind enough to contribute to it. But Mary Beth, one of her write-ups is around the sales process. And in particular, I know you're very passionate and I think do a fantastic job of kind of that qualifying to POC stage to make sure that you're kind of spending your time appropriately. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Mary Beth, please?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, would love to. If there's Nexthinkers on, they're going to go, wow, he's got her pegged, because this has been a really big initiative, for us, as a company and in North America over the last few years. And it goes into and folds into being this evangelistic sale, right? Because this period where you're engaging in this multi-threaded motion is it's building awareness, right? It's building awareness and getting people on the hook, figuring out, which one is actually in this growth mindset that's going to latch onto this and take it forward. So there's a lot that has to get done in the beginning of the sale, right? In that qualified period, there's this engagement portion where all of the discovery takes place, meeting in a multi-threaded way, meeting all of the key stakeholders, developing your champion, right? And defining, right, what the current state is, what are the current problems, and then what does future state look like? So all of this happens while you're qualifying the opportunity. So it does take a bit of time, and it has an impact on the sales process itself and the length of it. But the key is creating the vision match, right, with your champion, as well as creating that vision match with the person that actually has, we call them the economic buyer or the person in power, right, that is going to either has the budget or is going to be able to go get the budget carved out somehow to get it approved to spend. So there's the defining the current and what does the future state look like. There's the value cases that need to actually, be defined, agreed to, and confirmed. And then it creating that vision match, and then it's getting it confirmed with power in order to actually have everybody aligned around taking the next step, because we're all investing in moving into, if it's a proof of concept, proof of value, whatever you want to call it, there's time, money, resources, that are invested there. And the last thing you want to go do is do that and then not be able to close your deal. So qualifying it and doing all those steps is really important, right, to being able to move your deal and getting it done in the end.
So two follow-ups. There must be situations where the sales teams are all fired up to chase this, big opportunity, big accounts. And what do you do if it doesn't really, it really doesn't go through all those qualifying steps? Do you have situations where you say, no, we're not going to pursue this?
Well, that's such a great question. I have done this in the past. We do a risk assessment. I mean, I like to get to the creative yes instead of saying no. So, when we're in that situation, I think we need as a, cross-functional team, and we decide. Because if you don't have a piece of the puzzle, like we call it the QP formula, if your QP formula is off, we have to all decide that it's worth taking the risk. And if it's worth taking the risk, we're wrapped around it and we go off and we do it. I would say we don't want to be in that situation, but we've gone and we've done it. And it actually turned out well in some instances, and there's some instances where it didn't turn out so great.
For my edification, what's the QP formula?
Oh, so the QP formula. So I'm talking visualize now, which is the value selling methodology that we use here. So the QP formula, it has these different variables in it. First is you have to have a confirmed vision match, right? The second is, that confirmed vision match needs to be confirmed value tied back to a business case that's time bound and measurable. You have to have a mutually agreed to plan with power, and then you have to have power confirm all of those variables. So that QP formula, if it's off and you don't have one of those pieces, we meet as a team and we decide if we're going to go. And normally, the only piece we might not have is ultimate power. We're usually really good at getting all of the other pieces, the vision match, the business issue, all of those other things. So I've seen it really work well. If we can't get to power before the POV, but we've got it slotted where we're going to meet the person that's got power in the middle of the POV, and then we're able to move it, I've seen that work. So.
Well, so my second question was going to be around, because I know you're passionate about we hear about medical all the time, but you're very passionate about visualize. So you kind of took that question, but maybe I'll spin it back over to you, Nour, and you can kind of see vaguely over your I guess it's your left shoulder, but the whole concept of your visualization board. Mary Beth talked about it in terms of visualization in the sales process, but maybe you talk about how you incorporate it.
Yeah, it's very much aligned with what Mary Beth is talking about, is the qualifying, and let's get alignment between, do we see the opportunity? Do we see a right fit before we go pursue it? Randy, you and I have talked about this. If you think about, and increasingly more astute sales organizations are thinking of this, right? 10 deals, you're going to win 3 because you're the right relationship, right fit, right opportunity. You're going to lose 3 because you don't have those. So the real play is the 4 in the middle. And it's you and I have seen so many individuals and teams go pursue all 4 equally, where you're not the right fit. And I think our previous guests have said, if you can find ways to disengage from those and really focus on where you're the better fit, now you're on the positive side of that formula. What we do with the visualization is now imagine bringing that right client or the right opportunity into a visual canvas where you're now kind of jointly developing the vision that Mary Beth talked about, really talking about, here's where we're going, here's how we're going to get there. Are we aligned? Are we on the same page? Are we both willing to invest the time, effort, resources to create those business outcomes? But it's a great tool. We just picked up another same client, 2 additional projects this week of visually articulating kind of where we're going, what we're doing. Thanks for asking that. I think we've got a great question from Susan Robbins. This is for Mary Beth.
All right, Susan, thank you. Mary Beth, I'm having some trouble with upward mobility. There are way too many boys club sales leaders. How do I break through the noise, or how do we get more sales leaders like you?
Well,
Randy and I are not part of the boys club that she's referring to. I just want to put that out there.
Okay. So it's a really great question, and I get asked it a lot. So, I mean, part of the reason why I'm doing this is to get visibility so that other women in IT see that it's out there, it can be done, and they have something to look, kind of to mirror, to say, this is what good looks like, or this is, look, she did it, I can do it too. That's half the reason I'm here, right? So I wasn't very fortunate in coming up to have that. All of my mentors, were men, and that isn't a bad thing, because they were men that actually helped me grow and, advance my career. So what I would say though to the question is, if you, I think that having a mentor is the best thing that you can do, Jazz. So having a mentor is something absolutely you should do. And I would say don't necessarily look for a woman mentor. If you can find one, I think that that's great, but find, someone that is going to help you, break through and crash kind of through the ceiling. And I think that that's what helped me.
I'm reminded of both Jazz Sud that we had, she was great. Jennifer Haas, Susan also brought up that, and I would encourage you to listen to that podcast or watch that live stream. Jennifer also talked about the 3 ships: mentorship, leadership, and sponsorship. And you really need all 3 from both men and women leaders to kind of help pull you up, pull you along that journey of personal, professional growth into bigger opportunities. The good news is, and Randy, I'd welcome your comments. I think more leaders are recognizing that diversity, cognitive, ethnic, gender can no longer be lip service. I think we got to start doing much more proactively to bring up some of those less represented communities within the leadership ranks within bigger opportunities.
Yeah, and it's kind of,
sorry. The interesting thing though, which I mean, I actually got the sponsorship and the mentorship, you know, in very male-dominated organizations. I mean, EMC, back in the day, very male-dominated. That was my first regional manager position. And, you know, moving to Brocade and having EMC as my customer, I mean, I was the only woman at Brocade in that kind of position. And the CEO basically put me in that position. So his mentorship and his sponsorship was critical in my career growth and trajectory. And him trusting me with that account, pretty big.
So Mary Beth, I want to build on that. And Susan's got a great follow-up question of how do you, if you're a young or in the spring of your sales career, how do you go about finding, and I'd welcome, and again, Randy, yours, and I'm happy to jump on this as well, but let's start with Mary Beth. How would a Susan find a mentor? How do you recommend her, maybe within the organization, external to it? What's the best way for them to find a mentor?
Well, I first would look inside the organization, and it doesn't need to be someone inside like the sales organization or the solution consulting organization. Like I had a mentor once that was in customer service because I couldn't figure out a way to use my power of influence. What I was doing in the past wasn't working anymore. And I felt like he was going to be the best one to help me, you know, through that bottleneck that I was having. And I'll be forever grateful to him. So I would say, you know, you have to look around and see the people, you know, that you kind of want to be like. And then I think you have to be proactive and ask. I was just asked, I mentor a lot of people informally and formally. I was just asked twice this week, right, to be someone's mentor. So you know, when one's in my organization, one's not. So I definitely look inside your organization. Who do you want to mirror? Who do you kind of like the way they handle themselves? Because it's more about your growth as a professional, which is also going to help you personally, than, you know, climbing the ladder. I think that's beautiful.
Randy, let me ask you to build on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say totally agree with what Mary Beth said. So I think having somebody who's senior within your food chain is good to have at your own company. Having somebody who's outside of your food chain is great. When Sun first acquired Storage Tech, I ended up connecting with the CFO, Mike Lehman, and that ended up being great. And what's also really good, a lot of times, Susan, you may think, oh, geez, it's a drag or it's down. But I'd argue, you know, Mike is a CFO, you know, he's got to be careful being sales to CFO. But, you know, Mike is a CFO at Sun, probably end up getting more out of it than I did. It was still kind of mutually beneficial. And then similarly, I would always try and have somebody who's outside of the company. And I've had, you know, several great mentors over the years, but it's just kind of taking advantage of it. And I'll use a little example. Peter Bell, who just commented earlier, and I were at a dive bar, Mary Ann's, after BC black tie graduation. Bill Campbell, who's Silicon Valley guru, God, amazing, rest in peace, was there with us having drinks. So I kind of took the opportunity to say, I'm, you know, changing companies, you know, looking for a mentor. You know, would you heard great things about you? You know, would you, you know, do me the honor? And it's kind of seizing the moment is, I guess, the biggest thing I'd say. And then lastly, if I'm allowed to give another option, would be I'd say join sales community. And you've got your kind of pick of the litter. And I'd say most people that are there, we have, I think, 240, 250 or so, which Mary Beth is included in, of the advisory board. So feel free to reach out to any of them, including either of us.
So I want to. This seems we seem to have hit a hot button here, because Gosia wants to know, what are the key traits you all look for in mentors? Mary Beth, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the traits you look for? Seidl, then I'm going to come to you.
So I think you have to look for someone that's going to listen to you first, right? And discover what you want to get out of it. It isn't all about tell. It's a lot about ask and listen and collaborate and test. And so I think you have to look for somebody that exhibits those characteristics. And and someone that is not a lone wolf, someone that's in it for the team, in it for the business and the impact. And if you find someone that has those characteristics, I would be proactive and say, hey, and even if it's around a specific thing, like what I did with Terry Clerkin, it was, I need a specific mentorship around getting my power of influence back, because I was in a different organization. It was passive aggressive, and I came out of EMC, which was aggressive, and it wasn't working anymore for me. So that's what I would definitely say to look for.
Randy, couple traits of a great mentor.
Sure. And I'll add on to the laundry list of the prior question, but I'd also say somebody on the end user customer side, or partner, if you're involved in partners, do that. A lot of times people, I think, are gun shy about asking people that are senior. Senior is in experience, not necessarily age, but CEOs, anybody, the CIO, CFO, typically they get to that level because they are good listeners, as Mary Beth said. They're generally speaking good people. And I would argue a lot of times people that don't really get the full escalation up career-wise are ones who really are not authentic. They really do not want to give back. So those would be some considerations. And I would just say, seize the opportunity whenever you can. And then Nour, just thinking back, plays in a little bit with your, curve benders, and, what is a curve bender, right? There's the, professional side, but personal side, and just kind of genuineness, I guess, that comes into play. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning the book. So Curve Bender's brand new book out this last week, and it's all about relationships. Gosia and Susan, you would really appreciate this, that have a profound impact on shaping our direction and destination. So not just helping us short-term execute, drive performance and results, those are important, but those that shape us, shape the manager, shape the leader, shape the human being we become. So I'm gonna piggyback on and really echo both Mary Beth and Randy. Number one, somebody within your organization, somebody within the sales organization who understands what you go through day in and day out, somebody within the company that understands the company dynamics and culture, somebody completely outside of it. That really gives you different lenses, different perspectives. I look for who cares, and not just say that they care, but they genuinely demonstrate that care and a vested interest in you. The listening part is critical. Again, what Susan might be interested in, her personal and professional growth, is probably very different than mine. And I've never believed coaching, mentoring is one size fits all. And then they also need to, hopefully it's someone you don't have to try to impress. So they can be candid with you, and they can say, Mary Beth, you're brilliant, as an example, but nobody's going to see that brilliance if you're abrasive. So we need to hear that. We need to hear that the way we show up is not necessarily the way we intend to show up. And I think that's important, and a great mentor can always highlight that. So great question. Please, our audience, keep it coming. Randy, I want to go back to something Kevin Purcell asked, which is when we were talking about the sales process, how do you get your partners to execute a consistent, I love the consistency in Mary Beth's kind of sales methodology. How do you get others that you don't have direct authority over, but it's more of an influence relationship to also embrace, maybe a channel, embrace that approach? Then I'm going to go to Mary Beth. So Randy, how would you do that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it's probably hard or awkward, and this is a broad generalization, but say like a Jim Sullivan who's at NWN, big believer in Medic, those sellers now, post him coming on as CEO are all very coin operated, but I'd say typically a lot of channel organizations, no offense, are typically not like that. So it really takes reaching out and educating, and you may or may not have a willing recipient on the other side, but typically if you can get them plugged into your CRM, sales process, all that, they can realize kind of what, reap those rewards. And on the one hand, you would think, okay, common sense should prevail, which is, well, Mary Beth has this great sales process. She leverages Visualize. So if I can do that as an individual, that makes me better. But I'd argue, unfortunately, not everybody's wired like that.
Mary Beth, let me ask you, Nexthink, do you work with channel partners, and how have you been able to influence them to likewise be consistent in their use of your sales methodology?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you, right, that there was a silver bullet. We're just figuring it out ourselves internally, to be honest, and getting it down and getting it repeatable. And right now, our channel organization, unless it's being sold as a managed service, which is bundled up inside, right, a different service, our channel organization and our partners right now are really an introductory factory, and we basically run the sales cycle. But that's part of enabling them, right? So training them on, value selling is an important piece, and we leverage everything that we have internally, externally for our partners. But it's a really long sales cycle, and sometimes they don't have the patience for it yet, right, to see it all the way through. So they'll make an introduction, they'll be with us on discovery, they take one piece, we take another, and as long as we're managing it for now, where we are in our evolution, that's the way that it's translating to our partners at this stage.
Randy, got a follow-up question.
Yeah, I was thinking tied in a little bit with mentorship of what you're saying in terms of, giving and getting feedback, Mary Beth. I know in the podcast you talked about using an executive coach. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that in terms of, how that works, what you get out of it. And then Nour, I know you do a lot of that as well. So maybe when she's done, you can give some feedback as well. Yeah.
Well, I have a couple different examples. I'll start with the one that I just started, actually. So I'm just starting to kick off, an executive coaching relationship here with an external coach, at Nexthink. And, in our first, conversations, it's really about not how I do the job. I think I've kind of proven that I know how to do this, or I know what to do. It's more in the how. Right. So it's building a better way to communicate. It's building a better, having a more even kind of tone and observe. And so the first kind of thing that they asked me to do was to observe myself. Now, I'm a person that is extremely self-aware of what my shortcomings are. I kind of said it in the beginning that I'm so passionate, sometimes it's a blessing and a curse. And so they've asked me to observe myself and to kind of see where I'm getting to a quick decision, whether it's yes or no, and to take a breath and to figure out, let it settle, let it get to the back of your brain. And so that's what I'm doing now is I'm really observing my behavior and observing myself and making notes where I'm being a little over passionate. And the other thing that they're working with me on now, and I do think it stems from the team growing so fast and me being in complete control of everything and then having to relinquish over time. So I've become quite the enabler, which is not great in my position. And the team, if they're on the phone, they're going to crack up, and I call, oh God, I'm making your bed again. I call it, I make their bed, because that's what I do for my kids. I make their bed. They leave it undone. I'm making their bed. So I have started kind of to be an enabler and making other people's bed. And it's just not what the person in my position should really do. And I've got to kind of get out of that habit. So that's what they're working on with me now. I've had others that have worked on other stuff. And I'm going to tell you, I've been in the industry for over 30 years, done a lot of different things, a lot of different companies. And you can only get better when you have a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just for those that know, typically it would be an external person and the company would always pay for that, correct, Mary Beth?
Yes.
So definitely something to take advantage of. And then I've had the privilege of Dave Nour being my executive coach over the years. So Nour, maybe you can kind of share kind of how it works, or maybe insights for those that are on that may not really be aware, and especially as it relates to, I'll say, getting the companies to pay for it.
Yeah, so let me set the stage. I want the audience to think about this for a second. Great athletes, entertainers who are already doing well, hire a coach to help them get to that next level. for some reason in business, the perception is you're broken, and that's how you get a coach. So number one, I don't want to respectful. I don't want to work with broken people. When I met Randy Seidl, he was rocking it. He was doing great. It was like, and Mary Beth said it, being aware enough to realize I'm doing well, but I believe there's a opportunity for me to learn and grow. And that's really when a coach can be really impactful. So number one, you're not broken. It's already taking your existing performance and help you reach another level. Number two, chemistry is critical. Randy and I've got his cell number. He's got mine. He calls me. We talk. The chemistry is really important. You may not always like what your coach says, but there's got to be a level of respect. There's got to be a level of trust, and vice versa. So one of the first questions I ask executives I work with is, are you coachable? Are you willing to, you don't have to like what I say, but are you willing to listen? And full credit to Randy. He listens. It's you're welcome to do, you're an adult, you're an executive, you're very competent. You're welcome to do what you want. Here's just something to think about, which really leads me to the third one. And Mary Beth said this. Most leaders, most managers already have the skill. They already have the knowledge. So the real upside opportunity is behavior changes. And that's a lot of what I focus on. And that's never a switch. It's always a dial. So what do we need to dial up? I want you to do more of that. What do we need to dial back? Listen, you've got a great energy. You've got a great excitement. That can be overwhelming to some people. So just take a step back, breathe, let them kind of fill in the space, and then you can add value. And by the way, ask better questions. So the way I work with people is, again, executives who realize they want to raise the bar in their performance, they reach out. I usually have a conversation or two with them. Why do you believe you need a coach? What are some of the behavior changes you believe we need to change? Then you kind of prescribe, you really diagnose, and then you prescribe set of changes. We talk once a week. I was talking to a phenomenal executive woman, happens to be a leader, last night, 10 o'clock after she put her kids to bed. And that was the time that we wanted to, she needed to talk. And I'm happy to report that I helped her off the cliff. Right? It's okay. And just not having somebody you don't have to, as an independent sounding board. I think Mary Beth and Randy both realized that a coach doesn't have an agenda. A coach is not competing for a job inside the company. A coach doesn't, I'm not after anything other than improving your environment. So that sounding board can be really valuable to a lot of people. So Randy, you've got some experience with this, and you've seen people that have really excelled through that coaching.
Yeah, and I'll talk, again, you always try and be very self-aware, but as an example, doing these, this is, number 28, and I'm still working to improve to make sure I'm focused on the camera here, because every time my eyes want to go down and see you here. And then I'm also trying to take notes, but then I know if I take notes and my eyes stray off. So those are just kind of little things which I know kind of impact how I come across in Zoom. So as many times as I've, who knows how many, we've all done kind of hundreds of these, but kind of getting that outside feedback, which you're always great with me every single time. You're giving me the feedback because I ask, is something that's great. And another little tidbit I had years ago, I can't believe I can't remember her name, it's Son, but she said, Randy, when you talk to people, if you're standing up and they're sitting down, you're bald and you're large, they're not listening to anything you say. All they're doing is thinking, oh my God, there's this gorilla that's like looking down on me, right? So she said, okay, well, what you do? Like, what do I do? Like, I don't mean to do that. And I come across as, for people that don't know me, as this kind of mean, nasty person, but I'm, probably the, nicest, softest to a certain degree, still hard charging, but, try and be fair. So she said, okay, make sure, I can't remember her name, but, make sure you kind of sit down at eye level with everybody. And those are just kind of a bunch of just, little things, but over time that builds up and you think about the impact. So, I'd say whatever, typically, if you're an individual contributor, it's probably hard to get, company pay for coaching like that. But if you're anybody in a management level position, for you, it may sound like a lot of money, but for the company, it's just very short money to be able to improve your personal effectiveness, of which as an individual, it's great for the company at the job you are now, but also helps you to just become a better individual professionally and probably personally in the long term as well.
And what's the impact of that one behavior change, right? So I'm working with a leader right now that, without naming names, has a tendency to turn off a lot of people that leave the company. So their churn is higher than it should be. What if we're able to retain those exceptional people to stay with us if we just change that leader's a little bit, behavior? So I think both of you have seen it. The impact of it can be incredible. Mary Beth, I want to talk about You brought up some great attributes. I asked you predictors of future success of reps. And you brought up resilience. You mentioned in this our conversation, you brought up grit. You brought up curiosity. I love the listening. I want to talk about sales managers. So the best sales managers you've hired, and Seidl, I'm going to come to you as well. Likewise, are there in your interview process, or maybe you're taking an internal candidate, you're promoting them, are there 2 or 3? I know we all can come up with a list of 15, but are there 2 or 3 really strong predictors that great sales rep who was an individual contributor is now going to be able to transition effectively to really manage, to really lead?
Yeah, I have an example, actually. So, I hired someone that's a first-time manager. He was an individual contributor until he came to Nexthink. And he's really developing into a fantastic manager. And here's the reason why. First and foremost, he cares about his people. People first, before power, before anything. And he cares so much that he needed to figure out, right, how do I manage each one of them? Because they're different, right? And what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. So I think, people first. If you want to get surgical and be really great, you kind of then go down, what do I have to do for each person? I also think, he is all about the sales process, like in helping his team navigate this sales process of ours. Because we're evangelizing, it's delicate. It's complex, getting to the right people, right? So he's a mentor, he's a coach, but he is an expert in this value selling sales process. So it's about coaching, mentoring, but then having the discipline, right, to kind of follow and lead the team through this sales process. So those are the things that, those are the key things that I'm looking for in a manager. They have to be servient. And I think if you have those, I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Randy, let me ask you to build on that. I'm looking for in the interview process, either I promoted a sales rep or I'm interviewing for a sales manager, sales leader. What are the top 2, 3 high predictors of their future success?
So I'm a big one, as you know, on reference checking, and it's not reference checking with a stranger, but it's reference checking on somebody that firsthand. And today with LinkedIn, you can easily go through anybody and say, okay, of the people we're connected to, here's the 10 or the 100 or the 200 that I know well. Of those, who are the ones that know you well, and then you just talk to the person, and that's to me by far, I think the best way to do it. And then as a follow-on advice that I have for new managers is everybody thinks it's overcomplicated, and it might be, but number one is treat people how you want to be treated. So think about, okay, when you're a rep, what did you like or not like as a manager? Number 2, think about somebody that you respect that's in sales management. Think kind of what would they do, just like kind of in life, what would Jesus do? Not to be corny. And then the whole concept of kind of giving and getting feedback, which a lot of times gets lost maybe once in a while in the annual performance review process. But anytime if you're on a call, I as a SVP or GM, when I would go on sales calls with reps, I would say, okay, when we're done, can you give me some feedback? Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're asking me for feedback. And they're maybe a little uncomfortable. I was like, no. And then they may or may not say something to me. And if they do, it's certainly of great value. And then in return, I say, okay, can I give you some feedback? And then just by doing it and saying it like that, they're ready to kind of take it in. They know it's going to happen. They may or may not like it, but kind of just helps that whole kind of concept around kind of what I'd say is either, could be a conflict, but just is kind of genuine kind of discussion, getting feedback and improving and making sure your team is as productive as possible.
Love it.
We have someone in common though, right? So Randy actually referred me, one of the sales managers that actually works for me now. So that was like perfect. When Randy Seidl texts me and says, hey, there's a friend of mine that I respect, worked with, admire. I think you need to take a hard look at him. I'm taking a hard look and hiring him. Hopefully he's on the phone with us. I'm not sure.
Jim Murphy, I know, but and the painful thing for me is obviously I have a recruiting business, so I would rather get paid for placing him somewhere. So, yeah. But he is fantastic, and certainly think the world of him.
But Randy, it's also a common thread from Peter McKay to Keegan Riley to Kevin Haverty. A lot of the past guests we've had have said, don't be transactional, right? Your reputation, and it's a tight-knit community. A lot of people know each other, and you're either going to get referred or tangential reference checked by somebody, and they're going to want to know firsthand, what do you like as a rep? What do you like as a manager? What do you like as a leader? Yeah,
absolutely. That's totally the case. And maybe as a follow-on to my Jesus comment is I always think about it, may be morbid, but just think about it at your wake. Hopefully for all of us, it's a long time down the road, but kind of what are people going to be saying or thinking? And I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but that's kind of a little bit on how I'm wired to say, okay, what is it that they're going to say, or what is it that they're going to think, and are they kind of saying or thinking things to the level that you would want? And do you earn that? You deserve that.
Absolutely. Mary Beth, I got to tell you, in our podcast interview, you also mentioned a couple of really interesting tools. I'd love to hear. I think you said Congo is one, or there's a couple that are
Congo. That's a new one.
Right. There are a couple of tools that I just remember that I hadn't heard of. So talk about the role of tools in your sales methodology, in that evangelizing effort. What have you found to be really useful in supporting you and your reps?
Yeah, so I'll let me talk a little bit about it. So something that the corporation uses and is adopting, and then something that I would like to adopt. So let's talk about it that way. So in the prospecting and development, business development world, we use Salesforce, right, to automate, and be able to kind of track what's happening from a prospecting perspective. The other thing that we invested in, because we have to, so with the pandemic, we had to start doing things differently, right? And, I said during the podcast is, we still use the phone, right? But I do believe the connect rate on the phone has a lot to do with the digital tools that we're using, and the content we're creating. So it does start with content, right? You have to have content and then use the digital tools around the content. So we use Sales Loft, and the other thing that we've just implemented is something called 6 Sense, because we're very target account focused. We've adopted 6 Sense, and what that allows the sales organization to do is to understand like what activity is happening in your account. You can kind of track like the peaks, who's doing it, where they're going, what they're doing. And these are target accounts, these are not customers, right? So then that gives us the ability to customize our prospecting. So when you're prospecting like this and it's cold and you're evangelizing, you have to be prescriptive. So we've implemented that tool that's helping us, in a really big way. And the other one that I was really pushing for, and I had an opportunity to use a little bit and see, is Gong. And I'm a big advocate for Gong. And the reason why is because we're in this virtual world, right? And Randy even said it, I lose eye contact because I've got to. With Gong, it's a tool that helps you record your sales call, not only so that you can get better, but maybe it's in a coaching situation for you and your manager. And then on top of that, it can give product marketing insights into the messaging that's resonating or not resonating. And then on top of that, if you have to enable an organization, you can use specific calls, right, to say, here's the best of the breed. Go ahead and listen, learn from this. So
this has been a fantastic conversation. Seidl, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about sales community before we thank Mary Beth.
Great. Amazing how time flies. Mary Beth, fantastic. Really enjoyed it. And Nour, as always, thank you. So if you want to learn more and sell more, long story short, go check out salescommunity.com. We have a no-brainer 30-day free trial. Obviously, we do it because it works and people stay with it. I'm not at all offended if you do it and then you want to bounce off, but just tons of fantastic content in all different areas. So definitely encourage you to go there. And that's where we also have the recording of this with Mary Beth, if you want to share that with others as well.
Mary Beth, on behalf of Randy and the sales community, thank you for being our guest. What's the best way for our audience to learn more about you?
Oh, okay. So there's a couple ways. So LinkedIn, so my profile is out there and very visible on LinkedIn. I do have, I'm active on Twitter. It's pretty much business on Twitter. You're going to see personal stuff from me on Twitter. I stay away from the social media platforms, from a personal standpoint, pretty much. And then another place that you can go learn about me is at nexthink.com. I'm part of the executive team, so my bio is out there as well. There's been a couple of articles published recently about me as well. I won like this award in tech, women tech leaders. If you want to read my story, you can go there.
Perfect. And I want to thank our audience. Thanks for joining us. Remember, each Wednesday, we publish a podcast in the morning with fabulous guests. And then typically around noon Eastern, there are guests on LinkedIn Live. We're also live on Facebook and YouTube as well. On behalf of Randy Seidl and sales community, I'm David Nour, your co-host. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.